everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Strange Pathways. I've had an absolutely fantastic week. It's been beautiful. It's been very relaxing. And I hope everyone out there has had just a wonderful week as well. I've played a lot with my 5 cats. I've played with my dog quite a bit. And the wife and I have taken some very beautiful car rides around the scenic Pennsylvania woods. Our first story, we're going to go all the way back to April 17th, 1966 at 5 a.m. in the morning. How's that for precise? Chief Gerald Buschert is on patrol in Mantua, Ohio. And the sheriff's department sends word over the radio, keep your eyes up. Look for lights in the sky. Now, Buschert races home to wake his wife, grabs his camera. Remember, it's 1966. Not everyone has a camera on them at all times. Now, his wife, Joan, said, I was half asleep. And he's babbling and he's making very little sense. I don't blame her. You don't wake me. There better be a huge UFO in the sky. Hint. And that's exactly what it was. It's an object resembling 2 tea saucers joined together. And it's not far from their yard. It's lit up. It's glowing. It's making no sounds. It moves very slowly, very deliberately to the east. Gerald grabs the camera, snaps a photo, and the object moves out of sight. Now, it's around this same time near where they're at in a town called Ravenna. There are these 2 deputies, Dale Spaur and William Neff. Let me tell you about Spaur. Spaur is a mountain of a man. He's a 6'7" tall man. He was the gunner on a B-51 in the Korean War. My dad always said, you flip the bird to a Korean War vet, you pull back a bloody stump. Now, Dale Spaur and William Neff, who had the delightful nickname Barney, they're investigating a car abandoned at the side of a road. Now, this vehicle is filled with radio equipment, and on the side is a triangle with a lightning bolt through it and the words 7 steps to hell. They hear a strange humming sound. They turn around and they see a saucer-shaped craft. This thing is 50 feet long, 20 feet high. It's coming up from behind the trees and it hovers right in the air. The officers, through the bright light, they can kind of see what might be a dome on the top, maybe a thick antenna. Spaur reports back to the police station on what he's seeing. The dispatcher, in an amazing display of pure Americanness, tells the officers, shoot it down. Welcome to Earth. Just so they'll be able to prove their story. So Spaur draws his gun and aims it at the craft. And then their sergeant, a man named Henry Schoenfeld, gets on the radio and goes, Don't shoot it down. Wait there until somebody comes with a camera. But just like the other craft, it starts going to the east. Spaur and Neff get in their car and they start to chase it. These 2 cops are chasing a UFO. 30 minutes later, they're outside of their jurisdiction. They're racing down dark roads, back roads, over 100 miles an hour. They get to the Pennsylvania border. Officer Wayne Houston of the East Palestine Police Department joins them. It continues over the state line. Even as dawn breaks, they can see the lights of this craft in the sky. So back in Ravenna, the police department calls the air traffic control tower in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. While they're on the phone, Spaur radios in to say, hey, guess what? I'm seeing fighter jets in the sky flying towards this craft. Another deputy also sees 3 jets moving in to intercept. At 6:15 a.m., Spaur and Neff's car runs out of gas. They pull into a Conway, Pennsylvania service station. An officer is sitting there, Officer Frank Panzanella. He's drinking coffee, just watches this UFO sail by. Now, Spaur, Neff, Houston, Panzanella, they're listening to their radios. And they pick up chatter between the pilots who are chasing the craft. They see the craft, they see the jets. All of a sudden, the saucer accelerates very quickly, but it doesn't go east. This time it goes up and just disappears. The problem was, this sighting was one of the most dramatic and credible ever reported. People said it was like a bomb was set off in the town. Those involved, endless phone calls, knocks on the door at all hours of the day and night. One of the witnesses, one of the police officers said it was 3 days of living hell. So remember, all the way back, Officer Bouchard wasted 0 minutes getting his film developed. He gets it developed, and it is an incredibly clear photo. In fact, if you're on YouTube right now, that is going to be the cover photo of this episode. That photo will be up there. You'll be able to see it yourself. Bouchard, satisfied that he has a decent enough image, calls the Cleveland office of the FBI. The agent there refers him to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio. Bouchard's told someone will be in touch. The next morning, Major Hector Quintanilla calls in. They discussed the incident. They discussed the photograph. And the major told Bouchard he could release a copy of the photo to the press, but send the negatives directly to him. He's a police officer. He agrees. You don't go against the military. It's chain of command. Sadly, it all begins to look like a setup. The photographic evidence, the eyewitness accounts, doesn't mean squat to the Air Force. Quintanilla releases a statement saying the film is severely fogged. The fuzzy image on it was nothing more than a processing defect. I want you to take a look at this photo. Go to YouTube right now if you're listening on Anchor or Spotify. Go look at this photo and tell me if this looks like the planet Venus, because that's what the Air Force said it is. They said nothing was on radar. No fighter jets were sent up. The Air Force screwed these good men over. These were good men doing the right thing. And they were screwed over by the Air Force. They were devoted men. They were family men. And the United States government has just said that these men, one of which is a Korean War veteran who spent a lot of hours in the sky, were dumb enough to have chased a planet from Ohio to Pittsburgh. I'd be furious. You should be furious. This is why UFO reports are not taken seriously, or at least haven't been for many years. Because those in power make fools of the witnesses. Civilian astronomer J. Allen Hynek, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, was working for Quintanilla at the time. Later on, though, Hynek would say he was never told about this. He never suggested it was the planet Venus. If you think all this is harmless, remember this. Dale Spaur would never be the same man again. He had very little respect amongst his neighbors. He lost his job. He lost friends. He moved to West Virginia and worked in a coal mine. And his life was hell after that. One day in the coal mine, he fell from a height of 70 feet and broke his back. He was in a coma for several days. The nurse who was supposed to sit with him the whole time found out. And whenever he started talking gibberish in a coma, she came running out of the room screaming that he was possessed by an alien. Spaur died of pneumonia on April 4th, 1983. And he has been quoted as saying, "If I could change all that I've done in my life, I would change just one thing. And that would be the night that we chased that damn thing. That saucer." Spaur didn't deserve this. Spaur didn't deserve to be made a fool of. When all the evidence pointed to these two men seeing a very real and unexplainable phenomena, the government turned around on Spaur, a vet, a man who risked his life for this country. They turned on him and broke him. You have to ask yourself, what would you do in this situation? What would you do if you were Spaur? Because in my mind, he did everything right. He chased down the UFO. He followed orders. He made an absolutely heroic effort to keep this thing in sight, to find out what it was. The man did everything right, and for that he was punished. And for that, the government, the press, the scientific community at the time should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. Our next story is going to take us to Dexter, Missouri. We're going to go all the way back to 1884. And that's where we're going to meet a 27-year-old man named Reynard Beck. Now, Reynard lives on this farm with his mother and brother Samuel and works really hard. Now, and he doesn't make a lot of profit, though, off of it. The family is pretty destitute. Now, one day, Reynard, ever hopeful, leaves early in the morning. He's going to go work in the fields, tend the crops. He returns home. He's tired, so he just wants to eat and go to bed. And that's exactly what he does. The next morning, he wakes up, and all the pain from the hard work in his back and his legs has gone. It's vanished. It's disappeared. He feels incredibly vigorous. He feels incredibly energetic. Reynard jumps out of bed. He's ready to start a new day. Instead of standing up, Reynard, though, he finds that his feet are not touching the ground, and he's floating in the air just slightly off the floor. Just a bit. Wouldn't that suck to just be able to fly 1 or 2 inches? Would it be worth it? I think so. I could win a lot of bar bets. Now, he hovers above the floor, and then he begins to climb higher and higher, straight to the ceiling, and boom, hits the ceiling. Now, he thinks, oh man, this is a hell of a dream. But pretty soon, he's starting to realize this ain't no dream. This is reality. Now, Reynard manages to get down in what I imagine is some goofy Willy Wonka. Maybe he burps or farts his way down. But he said no. He sits down on the bed. He grips the headboard so that he's not going to be lifted up again. And he just sort of sits there trying to wrap his mind around what happens. He tries to get up and walk again, but pop, his legs pop out from underneath of him, and he begins to levitate again. Now, his mom calls him down for breakfast, which, god damn, that would be funny, wouldn't it? Well, his mom calls him down for breakfast, and he knows that, oh, I can't go down floating because that's going to break my mom's poor brain. So Reynard pushes himself down again, and he takes his leather belt and he ties 2 large fishing weights to it. And then he tied a belt with sinkers on his belt, and he's not floating away. I like to think, though, that he's just kind of bobbing, looking like an astronaut on the moon. That's right. He could step on the floor, but he still has to do it very carefully. And he kind of finds his way around. His mom's like, are you coming down for breakfast? Your eggs are getting cold. No. He finally makes it downstairs. Now he's walking, and then he kind of hits him. Yeah, this is the 1800s. Like, it would be scary enough. 2021, it would be scary enough if you started to fly, because you know that, like, the men in black are going to catch you and dissect you. But now there's very, very religious townspeople. He's afraid that these people are going to think he's possessed by the devil, right? And they're going to burn him at the stake. So what do you do, right? If you're being burned at the stake, so there's only one of 2 things you can do. Remember, he's floating. He doesn't really have control of his flying like Superman. He's just kind of floating. So you can either just sit there and be burned, or you can float off into the atmosphere, off into space, where you turn into like a frozen mass of human flesh, a corpsicle. He decides, quite intelligently, Reynard, to not tell anyone about anything. So he goes downstairs. He has breakfast. I would have a very heavy breakfast trying to weigh myself down. And he's trying to move as naturally as possible and then go work in the field. Now, he hopes the next morning it's going to pass. But guess what? He is pulled up. Now, a few days ago, and Reynard gets used to moving around this way. And at night, he ties himself to the bed so as to not fly off to the ceiling. This goes on. He's able to hold it together for a week, which is kind of impressive in and of itself. If you turned into a helium balloon, could you pull it off for a week? I don't think I could. So, just like that scene in the Spider-Man movies, Reynard's experimenting, right? He bounces off surfaces. He moves through the air, testing how fast he could move, how he can stop. At one point, Reynard's older brother walks in and catches him. Sam thinks his brother's doing a trick with ropes, but then he starts to realize and starts to freak out. Reynard goes, calm down, calm down, calm down. This is not the devil. We can make money off this. There's your hint for the week. If somehow you get powers and they think you're the devil, just go, look, we can make money off this. You and me. Yeah. That works. The devil disappears very quickly whenever there's money involved. It says so in the Bible. So, Reynard and Sam tell their mom everything. And once again, it takes an amazing amount of effort to believe that this is not demonic. They begin to set up stage performances in front of the public. During the show, Reynard would use special metal handrails to move around his marquee above the audience, simply hover in the air. Like he was getting paid to do ordinary things. He would read a book, drink some water, just sit up there. Right? Yeah. Here's the thing. Would you pay good money to watch a guy write checks and pay his bills while floating like 20 feet above in the air? I would. That's worth a $5 bill, in my opinion. The show became popular. Why wouldn't? Now, most people went, oh, this is a trick. This is an illusion. A group of skeptics decided to expose the crook, and they tore up Reynard's tent. They're expecting to find ropes, hooks, wires. There's nothing inside, and Reynard just continues to calmly levitate in the air. No one was ever able to expose Reynard. Everybody just went, okay, this guy is able to float like a balloon. There was actually a journalist from the Kansas Star who was convinced this was fraud. But after attending Reynard's shows, he kind of went the other way. Quote, before the show, I searched the marquee carefully for wires, hydraulic ramps, hidden supports for any device that might provide a clue to the mystery, but I found absolutely nothing. Stick the air above and below him, but did not meet with any resistance. With extreme reluctance, I came to the conclusion that he was, in fact, floating in the air. And Reynard and Sam, they go another 5 years. No one ever figured it out. 1890 comes along. Reynard decides, it's time. It's time. I'm done. Let's go back to the farm. Reynard just got sick of seeing people stare at him, and who can blame him? Afterwards, he practically became a hermit. He refused to talk to journalists, refused to show anybody him flying, and through a closed door one day, Reynard spoke to a reporter and said, once a person is in the air, he can never be the same person as before. He never even left the house after that. Now, there were a ton of rumors to what happened to Reynard. They said he lost his powers as suddenly as he gained him. Another person said that he allegedly went outside and took off his belt, and he simply climbed up and disappeared from sight. And the truth is, we'll probably never know. And you know what? We can only guess as to how true this story is. Do you think Reynard Beck was actually capable of flying? That's a hard pill to swallow. I don't think any author that I have ever read has had more of an impact on my life and my beliefs more than Brad Steiger. Be that for the positive or the negative. I know there's a lot of skeptics out there who say, his work is inaccurate. His work has lack of scientific evidence, spurious content. But it just comes down to it's damn interesting. Be it true, be it false, it's damn interesting. And even if it's false, it does make you think. It was a big thing for me growing up. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of money, but it was a big thing for me to go into a Goodwill or a thrift shop, plunk down a quarter or 50 cents for a Steiger book, and you could almost always find those books. His books did sell well. And because of that, people would get them, give them away, family members would die, and what have you. There was almost always a Brad Steiger book on the shelf for me to buy. I have mentioned Steiger on this before, and we're going to dip our toe into that well again. Very same book, as a matter of fact. Steiger often wrote about what he called mimics, tricksters, what have you. And those were the most fascinating cases to me. I don't know if I agree with Steiger. If these are true, I don't know if I agree with Steiger that they were mimics, but they might have been peeks into a parallel dimension. They might have been just ghosts. I don't know, but I do find it terribly interesting. Once again, we're going back to the book Shadow World by Brad Steiger. And we're going to talk about Cary. And Cary, he's a freelance writer from New York. And in the spring of 1992, he goes back to Prescott, Arizona to be at the bedside of his father. His father is passing away. And unfortunately, Cary's father does die. And Cary is just left with a number of legal affairs. I don't know if you've dealt with the closing of an estate. It is an absolute nightmare. Settling of bills, sales of houses, division of property. It's not the most fun thing in the world. And you have to do all that while you're mourning. Now, Cary's mother and sister have been killed in an automobile accident outside of Phoenix in '84. And Cary hadn't lived in Prescott since '81, but he didn't really see a reason to return after his dad died. His dad had a lot of insurance policies, and so the hospital, medical bills, those are all going to be paid. The house is put up for sale, and he was left with a fairly decent amount of money. And he was going to use that to get a better apartment in New York. He was going to give him the time to finish his novel. So Cary's going through his things. And once again, if you've done this, you will understand. Cary begins to get a little depressed. He's going through pictures, and he's going through memorabilia, deciding what he's going to keep, what he's going to toss. And it's kind of sad to see your loved ones reduced to a few boxes. This is what I keep. And these things that they probably treasured get tossed. And he sees a picture of his sister, and it just breaks him down. So a switch kind of flips in Cary's head. He's single. He has some money. He's not married, not dating anyone. So he decides, and rightfully so, I wish I would have had the money to do this, that he's going to travel and kind of just get his head on straight before he goes back to work. So he decides to go visit Sedona, Arizona. And in his own words, he said, quote, "One day I drove out on the airport road, pulled over to the side, and walked to a spot that my parents used to take Andrea, my sister, and me to when we were kids. I knew that the New Agers had declared this spot one of the supposed hot vortexes, but I just wanted to see the spectacular view once again and remember some of the good times that we had as a family when I was a kid." If you don't know, a lot of New Agers have gone and said Sedona is a portal to another dimension, and you can have all sorts of spiritual things happen, and you can see portals open up in the sky. Kind of a Skinwalker Ranch type deal, minus the horror. But it's there that he meets this woman named Nara. Now, this young woman is meditating on a ledge that looks over a valley, just this gorgeous valley. And Cary just looks at her and goes, oh my God. She had long black hair, braided with 2 strands that reached her waist. She had a white buckskin shirt, faded blue jeans, and just as lovely as all get out. That's my cat. That's Greta Garbo, my cat. Back to it. He's just smitten with her from the get-go. And he says it was almost like she was sitting there waiting for him to arrive. So he goes up, he introduces himself. She tells him, "My name is Nara. Why don't you come sit with me?" And they sit there and talk until sunset. And they have dinner that night. And they spend the first of many, many nights in Nara's cabin together. Near, and I've never been here, I don't know, Oak Creek Canyon. Now, Cary had intended to only spend a few days, but a few days turned into a few months. He said Nara became his reason for existence. For 3 months, it was him, it was Nara, and it was Oak Creek Canyon and the cabin. He begged Nara to return to New York and to marry him. 3 months. And he makes trips into town to send his landlord checks. He's keeping his apartment. His friend is forwarding him letters from editors. Remember, he's a freelance writer. He throws them in the wastebasket. The magazine articles seem like something he had done in another time. He was kind of bubbling within, and he had an idea for a work of fiction, a novel, more of a romance novel type thing, and that's the way he felt. Now, Cary would often ask her to marry him. Nara would only say she's an Arizona girl and tell him that her people had lived here for generations. And she had a phrase that she used. "My soul is made up of the mountains, the desert, and the red rocks of Sedona. I am one with my Arizona." Now he's still trying to convince her. He would take her to New York. She would love the excitement, the museums, the libraries. But she would say all the excitement she needed was in Arizona. And if he would stay with her there, then she could be happy for the rest of her life too. He spends 4 entire months. Cary decides he's got to go back to New York just to keep a few of his connections and to check on his apartment. She seemed very stoic about him leaving. And whenever he gets in the rental car to drive to the Phoenix airport, she let one tear cry down from her brown eyes. Once he gets to New York, he tries to call Nara. And he finds out that the number he's dialed isn't a working number. He tries a dozen times before he gives up. He doesn't want her to worry about him. 3 days goes by, and he receives nothing. He decides, done, I've got the money, I'm flying back to Arizona. Remember, he lived at this cabin for 4 months. He drives all around Oak Creek Canyon and can't find the place he's been living at for 4 months. He's only been gone 3 days. So finally, he convinces his friend who came along with him, Ray. He convinces him to hike back through the woods where he thinks he was living. And they find an old, broken down, moss-covered cabin. It's dilapidated. It's falling down. At the end of the second day, they couldn't find anyone who knew Nara, knew where she lived. Ray's starting to think maybe Cary's losing it. But then they go talk to the waiters and waitresses. They talk with the tour guides, the shopkeepers, gas station attendants. They remember Nara too. He gives up. He's so confused. And wouldn't you be? Cary gives up and goes back to his apartment. And he falls into a massive depression. One year later, Cary is sitting in his apartment. Ray's there, another friend. He's discussing his writing. He's discussing philosophy, the latest Broadway plays, and Nara. Nara was a constant point of conversation for Cary. And there's a knock on the door just a few minutes after midnight. Cary opens the door. There stands Nara. He is astonished. He's absolutely stunned. She's dressed the same way as whenever he met her. White buckskins. But she's got black slacks on instead of jeans. Ray and his friend realize that this is Nara. They book it. They realize this guy needs some alone time. Cary wants to know what had happened. But whenever he asked the questions, she would just put her finger on his lips and remind him that she was there with him now. She tells him there's going to be time for questions and answers later. The most important thing is that I'm here with you right now. Cary and Nara go to bed that night, and he holds on to her tightly. He's afraid. Wouldn't we all be? Wouldn't we all be terrified that the love of our life is going to vanish? He finally falls asleep. He wakes up much later, reaches out, finds her. She's laying propped up on an elbow. And she asks him, "Why do you sleep so restlessly?" And Cary says, "Because I'm afraid if I go to sleep, you're going to vanish." And she laughs and just says, "Go to sleep, my love." And when Cary wakes up the next morning, she's gone. Cary's been to Sedona twice since Nara disappeared, as of the writing of the Brad Steiger book. Cary's been to Sedona twice as of the publication of Brad Steiger's Shadow World. He has visited all their favorite places. He's talked to friends they'd made. Nara has never been seen again in Sedona. A lot of people can chalk this up to just Cary having a break, having a psychological break, and imagining this person. But Ray and his friend saw this person too. Other people in Sedona had seen Nara as well. So what is Nara? We always imagine the people who go missing in the state forest, those victims of what has become known as the missing 411 cases. We always imagine some terrible fate befalling them, be it abducted by aliens, killed by Bigfoot or other cryptids, just plain lost. But what if those people who are missing in the national forests, what if the so-called victims of the missing 411 occurrences, those that are never found, what if they get to live out their best possible lives? What if they are happier than any of us could be? While they do leave behind sadness, grief, maybe for themselves, they are in the absolute pinnacle of happiness. Thank you so much for joining us again for this week's Strange Pathways. You can mail us, strangepathwaysmail@gmail.com. Come on over to our Facebook page. Don't forget, go over to YouTube. Leave a comment. Hit like. Hit subscribe. Tell a friend. Leave a review. It really does help. Get the word out there. I want this to spread beautifully. Thank you again. Have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves and each other.